Greetings and welcome to our webinar. Will GenAI break your storage? An industry dialogue. I'm Winston Thomas, the editor-in-chief of CDOTrends, and I will be your guide through this session, exploring the impact of generative AI or GenAI on storage infrastructures. As we all know, the rise of GenAI is exciting, unleashing innovation across various sectors. But for those of us managing data, a nagging question arises. Can our storage systems keep pace with the tsunami of data demands these models generate? Over the next 1 hour, we will delve into topics like the GenAI data deluge. We'll explore the specific data challenges posed by GenAI, from exponential growth to intricate workflows. Storage under pressure, how are different industries like healthcare, automotive, and even technology is adapting to their storage to accommodate GenAI demands. Building resilient storage systems, we'll unpack solutions and strategies that has worked to ensure your storage infrastructure can withstand the GenAI wave. And lastly, if we have time, we'll go into security and ethical considerations. As we generate vast amounts of new data, how do we ensure responsible and secure practices? To tackle all these topics, we have assembled a powerhouse panel. So let me introduce who will be on that panel. First, we have Nick Ashkenazi, Chief Digital Officer at Estella Pharma, who is pushing the boundaries of AI in healthcare. Milin, AI scientist at Mercedes-Benz AG, steering the development of AI-driven solutions in the automotive industry and other industries as well. Matthew, or Matt Oostwien, Chief Technology Officer, Asia Pacific and Japan at Pure Storage, a leader in providing innovative data storage solutions to handle the most demanding workloads. Now, before we begin, I would like everyone logged in to keep two things in mind. First, this panel discussion is not a one-way street. We invite you to join the discussions with your comments, suggestions, and questions. So please do use the Q&A button at the bottom. Please do not use the chat button, which is for our private conversations, but just the Q&A button. Next, a lot of the discussion will be based on a research paper and white paper from Pure Storage. Don't worry, look out for the follow-up emails and even chat prompts coming through your chat button where we will send the links. Just look out for them. Now, that's all I have. Let's jump into the discussion. But first, let's ease into what would be a huge, humongous topic with some general questions and industry observations. So maybe let's start with Nick, who is to my right in my panel.
Hi, Winston.
Hi there, Nick. Maybe let's look at this general question as there has been an intense focus in technology and in the general market on AI. And it's over a year now where we have heard lots about GenAI. Now, as we enter into 2024, what is going to change from what we saw last year? What are your thoughts?
Look, any question that has anything to do with the future creates challenges. Majority of us are dealing with day-to-day tactical and operational issues at all times. And the other problem that we all experience is that it's very easy and available to us to try to be experts with hindsight. The question poses the need for me to become an expert with foresight, and that's very, very hard. However, one thing is absolutely clear, and I'm sure our esteemed panelists here will cover that extensively later in the conversation. My view is that we will see across the industry, across any vertical, an increased adoption of new and different use cases that would be tackled as a result of brand new machine learning models being created, or large language models, or the adoption of AI components in an existing application, or creating of brand new applications. And I think every time we hear something in the news, the first thought is, wow, I never thought about this, that somebody would tackle this. And I think across the new year, we'll probably be seeing a lot more of that happening, because more and more entities, more and more companies will jumping in with proof of concepts, adoptions, and fundamentally they're just going to try to solve specific problems by applying the new tool set that comes through artificial intelligence, or hopefully what I think all of us will start using as a new term is complementary intelligence, that helps all of us humans become better in everything we do. So hopefully that helps. I'm sure there's other divergent views on the topic.
Sure. Thanks, Nick, for setting the stage. Milind, I'm just looking at what Nick has mentioned, and he actually coined the term complementary intelligence. I'm just wanting to see from your perspective what we are going to see for 2024. One of the reasons why I'm asking this is with Gen AI, people see now AI, especially Gen AI, as a solution looking for a problem. And the issue is there's not many use cases, actually proper use cases, but you are in the midst of one. So I'm just wondering, what do you see is going to happen in 2024? Just a broad stroke.
Thanks, Winston, for that question. Yeah, by and large, I agree with Nick, yeah, and not so much with you, Winston. When you say when you say Gen AI is a problem, is a solution looking for a problem, I'm not so sure. Yeah, it's a term. It's a kind of we've reached here. I should say, after decades of work on systems to help us with better decision making using data, and it has been surprising, the developments in the last 3-4 years. Yeah, the jumps. Even 3 years back, yeah, the best in the field were still not expecting the results that we are seeing. And with each jump, the capability and the possibilities increase exponentially. In 2024, we will continue to see those exponential jumps in capabilities. And from a solution design perspective, I would say, or solution perspective, I would say that intelligence, yeah, any kind of decision-making entity, it is extremely valuable. And this is one of the reasons why we have humans, yeah, in so many places in business process flows. Yes. And these tools are becoming more and more powerful to assist with those humans with decision making, and in some cases, yeah, even replace them. I heard this term somewhere. Instead of human in the loop, yeah, human on the loop. Yes, human monitoring. The intelligence, complementary intelligence in this case, yeah, as Nick put it, the activity. So I see very strong growth in potential solutions in 2024 with the jump in model capabilities. A lot of the things that we are talking about are still in the lab. They will start coming out in the wild now.
Thanks, Milind. Matt, your perspective?
Thanks, Winston. Well, it's always fun gazing into the very near future, isn't it? I think looking back at 2023, it was a seminal year for AI. We've been building on that for a number of years, but it was impossible to, go onto Twitter, onto LinkedIn, onto any news site and not read about AI. Quite frankly, I had to mute some feeds on LinkedIn because there's an amazing amount of experts out there started to appear last year. And I'm, tempered my enthusiasm with a sense of caution that we may be in for a little bit of AI fatigue. And I just wonder whether that appetite is going to continue through 2024. I know 2023 is a very high bar to beat. Here's my thought. There is a lot of projects that are underway at the moment. Some are simple, straightforward projects that will likely yield very quick improvements in, say, business processes. It's what we call the low-hanging fruit. But as Milind was alluding to, in the back burner are a heap of more of the complex projects that take a lot longer, that take bigger budgets, that take more infrastructure to be able to accomplish, I suppose, grander feats. And so I'm hopeful that in 2024, we'll start to see some really exciting use cases begin to emerge. Things that have been kept under wraps, perhaps in skunk works within organizations for the last 18 months or 24 months, will start to emerge. And I think this year we'll start to see some use cases that really blend together the best of what AI can accomplish with also the pragmatism of how business or an organization wants to move forward with technology. So I think there will be more sophistication in the market in 2024. There'll be certainly a little bit more pragmatism, and there is a lot more people out there in 2024 than 2023 that are more educated on this subject.
Thanks. Milind, just to add to continue what Matt was talking about, pragmatism. Is there a certain amount of pragmatism settling in within the corporations, or are people still looking at GenAI as a silver bullet from the decision-making point of view?
This is a very difficult question, Vincent, and with layers of complexity, I would say. So exactly as Matt was saying, there has been so much talk of AI. So and a lot of the people in senior management are not really technical people. Even for technical people, this is such a new tech that maybe they're familiar with how the thing worked 6 years back, and it is completely outdated. So at the senior management level, a lot of people are still trying to figure out what is possible, because all of these news feeds that Matt was referring to keep promising the moon. So there are two kinds of conversations I hear. One is that we have spent millions already, and we see nothing. And I hear this from senior management in companies, as well as from business consultants. Yes. And the second is, again, from both categories, but a lot, this lot is increasing, that, okay, you don't need to convince me. Yes, I know. I don't know how to use it, but this is the future. In 3 years, 4 years, this will change. But now tell me how. Yeah, what should I do? Where should I start? Yeah. And that is the part where there is a disconnect. Yeah, this is where the first lot is coming from. Yeah, we spent millions, but where? Yeah, you can spend millions by throwing it in the river, and nothing will come out. So, have you identified the problem properly? Yeah, have you identified the infrastructure, the business process changes required? Yeah, the mindset changes required. And this is where the slow trudge will start, maybe starting this year, but we will see this really pick up by next year. Yeah? People are trying to get their heads around on what really needs to be done before they can start planning execution plans.
Nick, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, it's hard to add to just really some really insightful and really valuable comments. The only one thing is, as we reflect, there has been many times in the history of humanity, especially in the more advanced age of, let's call it the last 50 years, of an enormous amount of change, where most of us missed some inflection points. And we can go back in democratization of compute, democratization of the internet and connectivity, democratization of the cloud. Needless to say, it's been proven now over many, many years historically that in order for something to succeed, it needs to be democratized. And many companies who are investing heavily in AI they are working towards the creation of tools and frameworks specifically for that purpose, is to make it simple, to make it easy to use, to democratize it. And organizations who understand that trend, I think, would succeed going forward, because that is the way to ensure its success. And for those of us collectively who sit in the sidelines and are wondering, is this a little bit of a blip on our radar screen that it's going to catch the news cycle for the next couple of months and it's going to move into the next news? My assessment is, again, with the limited amount of hindsight that we all deal with, is it is not a fluke. It is a new trend. And the question for all of us is, do we need to catch up on it, stay ahead of it, or just watch everyone else doing it? And my strong recommendation is jump in, because if you don't, you're still going to have data centers and not transition over to the cloud, as the cloud journey started about 20 years ago now. And so all of those are important components in the trend understanding and dynamic. So that's my simple view, and happy to be challenged on it.
It's an interesting point that you brought out in terms of jumping in, but just taking a step back, when it comes to any technology, including AI, if you look at it as a technology, three factors determine its success. One, it's technology, people, and process. I mean, that has been always the wisdom that has been given to us, and we need to balance in both. There have been also talks that AI sort of throws this balance out, and we need to rebalance what we have in terms of technology, people, and processes. And we can even extend it to whether we need to revisit the structure of organizations to make AI work across the enterprise. So maybe, Nick, you can just slightly look at it from your perspective, wearing a technology hat. How do you get this balance right? Because you're also dealing with people and processes at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, and I'm very much curious and keen to hear other people's views. And I think Matt and Milind covered this quite well earlier. It is critical, regardless of the trend, at all times, to ask ourselves, what is the fundamental problem that we want to solve? What does success look like? How different would it be when we're done and we're all celebrating that we'd achieved something? And may I suggest that success would always be associated with one of those three dimensions. It will always be the process is faster, simpler, easier to use, more efficient. The technology is simpler or more cost effective, and or people being in the loop or on the loop, to use Milan's comments, they are happier. They feel like their experience is better, or they feel like they're more productive in doing their job. So eventually, all problems that we try to solve that become business cases that turn into investments, they all would cover one of those three domains. And where I absolutely agree with you that where AI and GenAI would challenge that and rebalance those three scales is that it will force organizations to ask themselves, which problem am I really solving here? Which criteria I'm really after to move the needle on? Is it to make a process automated, more efficient, and no humans, where the process activates the humans versus the humans activate the process? Or is it I'm after cost savings and efficiencies as a result of utilization of that? Or is it to bring some new productivity into the company, into the enterprise, by basically allowing every human to do just more with less, so that I can provide augmented, complementary type of capabilities and intelligence that all of us need, because none of us can actually be a specialist in every possible domain. And so, again, the clarity for me is, what is the problem you're solving? And then, are you using the right tool to solve it? Because majority of the problems, after you clarify them, might actually have an entirely different solution than just grabbing a GPT that you need to create from the ground up, or building a brand new machine learning or a large language model. And so that's fundamentally problem, clarity for everyone to be aligned on.
Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, I like this concept of people, process, and technology coming together, because without the balance of the three, implementations tend not to work. Nick was talking before about his advice, which was jumping into AI. And I think we're all believers in what AI can do transformationally. But by and large, I don't think that's what the marketplace has done. If I talk to customers around the region and find out what they're doing with AI, and of course, there's some great examples of companies that are all in, but I think largely it's been treated as a cottage industry. You know, it's a side project of wonks, very smart people that are looking to do things in a laboratory and not necessarily deploy them in an enterprise. And therefore, it's easy to get the balance right when you're not impacting the broader business unit. What we're talking about here is bringing AI into the mainstream. And if you're going to do that, you're going to have to disrupt some of the existing business structure and organizational structure from a people person, from a tech person. Obviously, processes need to change as well. And that's where things get tricky. It needs to be rethought. The point is that we need to move away from this notion that is it or isn't it going to work? Because I think the consensus broadly is that it's absolutely going to work. It's the question of to what extent is it going to work, and how are those limitations going to be impacted by the decisions that we make from a technology standpoint, and how can we get out of the way of AI so that it can be as transformational as we want it to be? Because there's a lot of people watching this within organizations. There's a lot of stakeholders, whether that's the C-suite, whether that's the individual contributors, whether that's your customers. And I would go so far as to say we need to please all of these different people in different ways. We can't exclude groups here. AI needs to be far more inclusive. So I guess, yes, jump into AI, but be prepared to get your legal team on board as well, to have conversations around what it means, you know, for the governance of your organization. Talk to your HR teams as well, because they'll want to have a say in what it means from an HR and a people perspective, to say nothing, of course, of your business generating units, if you are a business unit, or perhaps the representation of your constituents if you're a government entity. So I guess what I'm saying here is that in order for us to make some meaningful progress in 2024 on the AI front, yeah, we need to make big investments in the software and the people, but we also need to step back broadly and say this is truly transformational, and we need to give it the permission to succeed, which means the buy-in from the board and the C-suite.
Thanks, Matt. We are going to switch to or dive deeper into linking storage to GenAI next. But just before we get into that, just like to remind our viewers, please do send in your questions, comments, or even your suggestions using the Q&A button. We are happy to hear from you, and we have 3 experts online now who are just waiting to answer your questions. Now, Milan, you mentioned the right infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important, and sometimes when people talk about data and AI, they don't really talk about too much about infrastructure until it becomes a problem. Then they work backwards. Now, GenAI, when you talk about it, it's actually mainly about 2 phases: training and inference, especially the production area. How does infrastructure impact these 2 phases from your perspective?
I have to say that AI is fundamentally very different from what we have been doing till now in IT departments. To begin with, the technology itself is stochastic in nature. It works on probabilities, unlike what we are used to, that we have written the code and now we expect it to perform the same every time. And it depends a whole lot on data. However, in the past, the focus has always been that we have transactional systems. The IT systems exist to assist with the smooth flow of transactions. Once the sale is done, once the transaction is over, we store the data for audit and compliance and whatever other purpose, but it's there. We don't care. The fundamental change that comes with incorporating AI in your business flows, in your IT systems, is that the quality of this data becomes extremely important. Monitoring what is going in, yeah, what the model has learned, yes, because data is the logic that is being coded, what it is producing as an output. There is a wholly, completely new approach required, and therefore a completely new infrastructure required to support this. So on the topic, will GenAI break your data infrastructure? I am fairly sure that if you think that everything will remain the same if we deploy AI across the same infrastructure, for sure it will break. Yeah, because you are going to need to redesign all the different parts, and then the infrastructure has to be redesigned to serve the revised processes, the revised systems that you have in place. And the centricity of and focus on data instead of code, yeah, this essentially means that you have to rethink and reevaluate the infrastructure you have in place.
When you mention rethink, does it also extend to the planning or even the procurement stage? Because usually procurement processes is a lot of planning up front, but the way GenAI works, it's not necessarily the way. You can't really predict how much you're going to be using. You might even use up all your resources within 3 months.
Yeah, for sure. You will also for procurement purposes. Yeah, you will have to. So all of it flows really from the plan first. We set the vision. What do we want to achieve in the next 2-3 years? Yeah? What are the systems and processes we will have to build? As Matt pointed out, well, also, yeah, what are the skill sets? Retraining, reskilling, hiring, firing. What is it that will be required? And then from there, yeah, all the different parts fall in place, including procurement.
Okay.
For sure.
Nick, your thoughts in terms of the 2 phases that I just mentioned in terms of Gen AI, and how do you actually make sure we have the right infrastructure?
Yeah, no, thank you, Winston, and agree with Milan on his comments. I think if it's okay to build a little bit on that, is that obviously, even if you look at them independently as 2 phases, there's a little bit of an overlap in the attributes of the stack, but there's also uniqueness and diversity. For example, obviously, you have most likely some type of an engineering skill set involved in an AI initiative or a capability. It's hard to imagine that you're not going to have a machine learning engineer or somebody in the data science domain. So if you think about what an engineer is looking for, and some of us have an engineer background on the screen, most of us have become accustomed to think of open standards, cloud native, open source, even simple. There's the terms used even in the engineering community. There's a little bit of a beauty and elegance around the technology that you're able to use. And so if you go through that, then you automatically go down the path of, well, there's not a lot of storage capabilities, and I'm sure Matt will challenge me on this based on the representation of pure storage. But there's not a lot of solutions out there from a historical standpoint, being file storage or NAS or SAN or that fits all of those attributes. And so you very quickly go down the path of object storage as a very critical component of something that you need to be able to have access to. The second piece is that even in those 2 phases of training or inference, you need the model to be running on storage that it's available at all times. It needs to be able to scale, and it needs to be resilient. Because can you imagine you're running your training and suddenly, the storage array fails, or the access to the storage is unavailable, or, if those 3 core attributes of the infrastructure stack don't meet the basic requirements, then it's not going to work. You're going to have non-repeatable results, which is very critically impactful for the training of the model. Those immediately apply for production or the inference phase of the model when you use it. It needs to be available scalable and resilient, but then you need to add some other pieces, and that's it needs to be secure as a storage, because authorization and authentication are very critical, especially if you start dealing with personal identifiable information, that it's a part of the data set and who has access to it, how does the model use it, how disposes it, and all of that. And at all times, especially in an inference phase, it needs to perform. And so normally in the world of technology, we manage performance by two core attributes, which is throughput and latency. So you need to have high throughput storage with very low latency. And as Matt would say, that's not always easy to achieve. So maybe in the training phase, you can satisfy yourself with local file storage or all the variants of it. But when you move into an inference phase, you definitely need to be thinking differently about it. And since the advent of kind of the hyperscaler capabilities, we have an enormous amount of flexibility to pick and choose on demand and pay based on consumption, those types of storage that can become available for the different AI capabilities that we want to deploy. And happy to deep dive into that, but I think I'll leave a little bit of the of the comments for Matt there, who can enlighten all of us, I'm sure.
Matt, please do enlighten us.
Well, I'm about to give Nick a job. So he's done well. I mean, look, just a little bit of background. Pure Storage has been working with NVIDIA, for example, for many years now. We were their first partner when it came to enterprise storage. We've worked with countless customers together around the world, shoulder to shoulder. The world's biggest AI supercomputer runs on Pure Storage over at Meta. In collaboration with NVIDIA. Obviously, we've learned a lot along the way. And I guess I don't want to repeat a lot of what Nick said because he was fairly accurate there. The training phase is, I think, getting a lot of the attention at the moment from the marketplace and the media. And the truth is that there isn't a huge storage requirement there because there isn't necessarily a big GPU requirement as well. When we move into the inference phase, that's where things change. That's where the data sets become larger. And that's where throughput, that's where latency and IO become incredibly important. One of the other elements here is, I think, this concept of utilization. If you purchase an asset, you want to make sure it's as utilized as possible. GPUs are hard to come by at the moment. They are expensive. There's long lead times. If you're making investments in GPU technology, then it's fair to say that you want to keep those GPUs at near 100% utilization for as long as possible. And the reason that you want to do that is because you have data science teams that are relying on the output of that. You have people that are idle while these systems are working, that are waiting for the results to come through. It's great to have very fast GPU systems, but unless you're able to feed those GPUs large amounts of data very quickly to keep those utilization levels up, not only are you not getting the return on the investment from the assets that you've been purchasing, but also your people aren't going to be as productive as necessary. So there's big implications for the type of storage that you choose, for how it is, I suppose, harmonized with the rest of the data center as well. And there's dozens and dozens of other considerations, of course, that I'm happy to go into if the questions go that way. But by and large, we need to be thinking not just about that training phase, but also about that inference phase. And just to speak very quickly on the training phase, I've spent a little bit of time talking about inference. Training is, of course, incredibly important. We don't want systems falling over during a training phase, so resilience is incredibly important, but also the amount of time that it takes to train a data set matters. If you're able to compress the amount of training time down from, say, 7 weeks to 3 weeks, you're able to then, train an extra model in that time. You're able to continue to refine your processes in that time. And that's time very well invested for any organization that's looking to, succeed in this space of AI.
Milind, thoughts you want to add on to that?
Between Nick and Matt, they've covered everything comprehensively. These are really important considerations. And one other thing maybe I can add is a small point that with GenAI, one of the things that happens is that it can generate huge amounts of output very, very quickly. And because of all this data movement, monitoring of data, etc., beyond storage, latency, training, and inference, you also have to store it in a cost-effective way. You have to ensure that now that even though we very often focus too much on the GPU part and power consumption there, yeah, as storage becomes and retrieval and reading of data becomes more and more important, efficiency factors also become extremely important there. Yeah? So the kind of storage infrastructure that you have in place for different parts of your AI value chain also becomes very important. So it's becoming a very interesting field, to look at how to adapt existing infrastructure for the coming reality.
Thanks, Milind. Matt, just a quick question. In your conversations, and I'm going to also ask Nick, we talked about two major phases, obviously, training and inference. Do we have two different types of storage infrastructures, or people are trying to use one storage infrastructure to try to address?
That's a reasonable question. I think that the difference is not so much what constitutes the systems that you're using, but really it's about the robustness and the scale of those systems. The truth is the type of tech that we use for generative AI or any AI really largely models what we would do in an HPC environment, or mining crypto, for example. There's a lot of similarities there. But when you are going through a training phase, you don't necessarily need that super scale and that super robustness. So I imagine organizations learn a lot during the training phase. They get to understand the model. They get to understand the implications of having this parallel stream of system within their environment and what it's going to mean for their data center footprint or their cloud footprint, etc. And then from there, they can scale as appropriate how to implement a system that's going to be able to not just be robust but also be efficient.
Nick, your thoughts on how you're actually addressing this?
No, thank you, Winston, and Matt touched on this, and Milind as well. Look, as we reflect on our collective cloud journey over the last 15 plus years across different levels of maturity, obviously, what the hyperscalers and just access to those three core resources of being storage, compute, and memory that has made available of you paying on demand has made it easy. So accessibility has significantly increased. The challenge with that is one other thing, as Matt hopefully would assert to that, is for anyone in an organization, what has done, it's created a little bit of a problem that we're all becoming a little blinded to. And the problem is related to the fact that the 0 to 4 layer of the stack now, of the ISO stack that we're all familiar and used to, have become abstracted for us. We normally don't worry about it, and we just, hey, create a new software or buy a piece of infrastructure, it runs in the cloud. Nobody really cares where and how. And that is normally a problem, because you have to be thinking about what does that piece of software actually need? What is the most critical resource that it's going to consume in order for the best performance to occur? Is it CPU? Is it memory? Or is it storage? And then you need to be able to continuously optimize the overall cost consumption, because you may end up with some huge bills at the end of the month and you're wondering, hey, I'm barely using this thing, but ultimately it's generating an enormous amount of invoicing for me and cost as a result, which may actually jeopardize all of your initiatives as a result, because people will start asking, hey, it was actually a little cheaper to run in the data center. Do we really need this cloud thing? And so this is the reflection we all need to be. And I think Gen AI will really make this problem even more important. And I'm not going to be surprised, to Matt's point earlier, if we continue to see the emergence of sharing capabilities, where due to the fact that GPUs are not easily accessible and they're still quite expensive, there might be an opportunity of creating communities across a number of companies who can invest, and we can actually build a GPU cluster together and then start using it in a sharing way towards consuming what you actually need while we collectively contribute it to the common good. And then ultimately the cost for me, it's much smaller than me having to build my own GPU scalable infrastructure, which is still unaffordable for many. And so that is for me the view. Again, happy to be challenged on this and happy to continue to evolve and learn. But it is really going to become even more important than ever before, the type of storage that you use, where does it reside, how close it is to where the model is, the large language model or the machine learning model, so that you can minimize IOPS and you can continue to improve throughput and lower latency at the lower possible cost.
Matt, your thoughts?
So just listening to Nick, because I think there's a little bit to unpack there. What you're suggesting, Nick, is local industry AI clouds. And I think we're going to see that this year, actually. I think there's another element that's going to accelerate this as well. So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, I agree with you. But there's another element which is around the sovereignty. That will be an important piece here in the region as well. We're starting to see sovereignty and issues of sovereignty picking up in Western Europe. There's legislation being passed in Italy, in France, in Germany to say we want digital sovereignty and ownership over the data, but we also want sovereignty over the stack. We want sovereignty over the server, the storage, the data center itself. We want to be able to point to a system and say this is where something resides. The view is that we'll see this wave hit us in Asia Pacific this year. Australia, New Zealand, absolutely. Parts of ASEAN, just look to Indonesia and the legislation that they've been passing, to say nothing of Thailand and Japan, etc. So, yeah, I think we'll start to see this. There's some really good examples of them peppering around the region. So that's something to look out for, I suppose, in 2024. I will want to say this, though, which was Nick's discussion around how the cloud has changed decision-making criteria and I guess made us blind to elements of the stack. I'm starting to see that pendulum swinging back. For the past 10 years or maybe a little bit more, in full fury, there has been a movement towards the public cloud. And in many ways, we've outsourced a lot of our competency and skill set with that. But many large organizations still have these competencies in-house, and they're starting to find that it's actually, cheaper, for example, to do it yourself. We're getting better latency if we do it ourselves. We avoid issues of sovereignty if we can put it in a co-located data center that's close by. So there's a newfound, I think, emphasis behind onshoring and bringing workloads back into what we might say is still a cloud, but it's just one that we own. But what's changed is that people are now used to utilizing the tools from a hyperscaler. So what organizations like Pure have done is we've made investments in a technology called Fusion. It's very similar to how you would work with an AWS, for example. You interact with our system, our storage system, in the same way you would interact with a public cloud interface. So from a usage perspective, it's the same. From a payment perspective, yes, you can still use a utility model with us, just like you would with a public cloud. So you're getting a lot of the similarities, but you're getting also the benefits of saying, hey, I know where this data resides. I'm getting much better latency, and quite frankly, it's cheaper. Because I'll end with these last words. In days gone by, yeah, it was probably cheaper to use public cloud. In days gone by, Airbnb was cheaper than a hotel. In days gone by, Uber was cheaper than a taxi. I think things seem to have changed where these service economy type services are actually more expensive than what we could find with traditional sources.
Milan, you agree, disagree?
I agree with part. So at least this is correct. Yeah, using public cloud is not cheaper. Yeah, this is for sure. And depends on the use case, but most of the time it it has serious generally governance issues. Yes, these parts are And if you have your in-house servers and your in-house data storage, it's just easier from a compliance perspective, etc. But where I see value, at least of clouds. So what this is something that all public clouds also offer. They will theoretically have these Chinese walls and have instances running only for you, so that you don't have to manage them. But where I really see the value is their ability to manage and offer the service of of reliability, of speed, uh, and others. And I'm sure that the tools that they are able to develop, especially with the in future monitoring tools, AI tools, etc., that they already have and they are developing, that bring the value that they bring. If I were to now, not coming back to my organization, but if we were to build this in-house every time for every organization, trying to find those capabilities, trying to replicate those reliability standards. Of course, we've done in the past, done it in the past when before the cloud was there, and even when the cloud was there. But it comes with a lot of challenges, and there is a reason why cloud became so so widely adopted. And I'm convinced that not for cost reasons, but for other value reasons, that there is a strong place for cloud infrastructure and cloud services.
That's true. And also, I think there are movements towards industry pre-trained models where they are putting it on clouds so that other industry players can use it, download it and use it. So yeah, and also the purpose of the cloud itself is shifting quite a bit. I have a question on the Q&A, and I would like to rephrase it slightly. Basically, Sanjay is asking, since AI generates lots of data, do we store AI data also? And what's the purpose? What purpose do we use it for? I would say, do we store all data? Because this is kind of going to the question, Milind, that you said that GenAI actually creates a huge amount of output. But do we store everything? Or do we have a rationale beyond what is to be stored or not stored?
Well, it really depends on your use case, but you will end up storing quite a significant part of it. This will be to monitor the performance of your result for figuring out failure points, or retraining areas. So let's say, taking a concrete example, you have now AI deployed to have conversation with your customers. And of course, this is the most important conversation that happens in any organization. Yes. You know that we know that LLMs, AI are vulnerable to new kinds of attacks, including prompt injection, etc. And this is a conversation that is going on. Yeah. You will need to store a lot of these conversations to find those patterns, so that you can protect those conversations against these attacks. This is just one single example. So if you imagine that when your salesperson was having this conversation with the customer, you're not recording anything. Yes. Now, all of these conversations, step by step with timestamp, this, that is getting stored. So yes, my answer is that as we deploy more and more AI across the business value chain, we will store exponentially increasing amounts of data.
Matt, you were going to say something? Just wondering.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Sanjay's question, and I'm going to answer it from the perspective that he wasn't necessarily talking about Gen AI, so I'll sort of open it up a little bit. As Milind said, it's always going to vary on the use case in the industry. And data has a tendency to be useful over periods of time. Of course, understanding, categorizing, and delineating what's going to be useful and what's not is always a challenge. And we tend to see people erring on the side of caution and perhaps retaining more than necessarily they should because they don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But let's look at some examples. If we go to the mining sector, and we see that there has been years and years of geophysical and geological surveying taking place of particular sites of tailings of landscapes to determine whether there is something worthy of digging up the ground for. In the past, the systems may not have been able to detect as accurately whether there's a business case for moving, a mine to a particular location. Now, by revisiting some of those data sets, mining organizations are able to look into that data and say, you know what, there is actually a useful business case here for us to be able to move forward. That's one example. Let's look at the healthcare sector. We've been taking some kind of, I suppose, medical records that are scientifically reliable for 100 years or more. We've had X-ray images for the best part of a century. And there's a lot of data sets that healthcare professionals and data scientists are able to look to be able to, use AI to look for patterns. So with that said, disposing of or throwing away, those particular data sets, of course, would have been a huge loss. But that's not to say all healthcare data is something that you would want to retain. And I dare say also, there is some privacy considerations with all of this that need to be kept in mind.
Good points. Now, I'd just like to slightly look at, because of we have around only 5 minutes of discussion left. I'm just looking, what happens, how would you know whether you have the right infrastructure? What are the telltale signs that your infrastructure is not ready for Gen AI or AI to broaden it? Maybe, Nick, you could take a stab at it.
Sure, Winston. I definitely would try, and I'm fairly confident based on how the conversation has gone that I'm going to get some help. So, thank you. Look, I think it really depends on cultural implications and ways of working and how organizations approach this problem domain. I would say that some organizations aspire to do a lot more planning upfront and discovery and analysis before they actually trial things. Other organizations aspire to slightly different approach, which is, hey, let's trial it and then learn from it. And then we can do a retrospective, and based on what we learn, we can continue to iterate, adjust, and evolve. And so I think it would really be something that it needs to become a part of kind of the DNA of how normally the organizations operate. I don't know that many organizations would actually significantly transform themselves first in order to adopt and trial some AI or Gen AI specific use cases. So I think it really pertains ways of working, operating model, and kind of mindset within. I do believe that in that trial phase, proof of concept phase is just probably valuable to try things and see if it works. And then as you move into productionizing, operationalizing, then to think of what is the right stack to deploy that, because you're obviously going to be running that for an extensive period of time and it has a life cycle. But whatever it is, adopting the right ownership model is also critical. Creating something and leaving it unattended for it to run and kind of roam across the cloud and do whatever it wants to do may not be a viable strategy, because Matt kind of highlighted it earlier. It's going to consume resources one way or the other, and in most cases, it's probably going to consume some pretty precious resources, and your bill is going to go up. So putting the right ownership model up front for whatever assets are being created, for whatever products and services are going to live in your stack, is important to think about it up front. And that in itself would also drive kind of the target state view of every component of the stack, including storage.
Thanks. Milind, any thoughts before I move it to Matt?
Well, not too much to add to what Nick just said. We monitor. In fact, just one small point. So, as Nick said, we are not going to start with the change. We will not start revamping our architecture, redesigning it. it is only at the POC stage that we do all the experiments. Yeah, we see what is working, what is not working. Yeah, what might be required. And even though very often, at least in software engineering, I've seen people don't have the habit of rigorous testing that, like, let's say, a civil engineer would do or an electrical engineer would do. But like destructive tests, nobody in IT really says, okay, I've done 3 destructive tests on this one. Yeah, but maybe it is those kinds of experimentations that we start seeing that, okay, the latency is going down. Yeah. Or if we are designing for this kind of throughput, does it really work? So yeah, those parameters will really emerge out of experience and experimentation, and then we solve for those. That is usually the way we go.
Thanks, Milind. Matt, your thoughts or last thoughts on Telltale?
Yeah, let me see what I can do in a minute. Do you all remember? Do you all remember a few years ago, it was before the pandemic, and everyone was outraged at the amount of power that Bitcoin mining and blockchain mining was generating? I think we saw news articles that were saying this sector uses as much power as New Zealand consumes or Ireland consumes, I think it was. And I remember thinking at the time, you ain't seen nothing yet. Just wait till we start switching on AI systems, and you're really going to see a hockey stick here. Here's the reality. If you're going to build this out in your own data center, there are 3 metrics you need to watch, of course. It's how much floor space you've got in the data center, there's how many kilowatts you can get into the facility, and there's how much cooling potential. If you exceed any of those 3 elements of the envelope, you're going to need a new data center. If you live in Singapore or if you live in Australia, there's a 4th consideration, and that's water. I remember reading a piece of research from about 3 months ago that suggested for every 10 ChatGPT searches that you do that are in depth, you use a liter of water. I might do 30 in a session. That means my machine's drinking 3 liters of water, which is more than what my doctor suggests I should drink on a daily basis. The point is, we need to ensure that we're making investments that don't lead us down critical paths that are going to burst our ESG bubbles. And I'll leave on this final note. Hey, let's put it in a public cloud. That's going to solve our problems. Unfortunately not, because it's still going to get picked up in scope 3. And while it's difficult to measure how much CO2 you're emitting in a public cloud, a really good allegory for it is what your spend is. If you spend more, you've got a higher amount of CO2. And to Nick's point, now and then costs blow out. Well, that's unfortunately also means your ESG scores are blowing out.
Thank you. Looks like we have come to the end of our discussion. So, wow, that was an insightful discussion. Lots of things to talk about, and we have only scratched the surface. Looks like we have a lot of other things that we could have covered if this had been 2 hours of discussion. But we are not going to do that, and I know people are going to get very antsy if they are going to be sitting for another hour. So first of all, thank you, Nick, Milind, and Matt, for all your insights. I'm sure the viewers has actually enjoyed it. And for the viewers, thanks for your questions. We had 1 or 2 questions. Please continue the conversation by reaching out to Nick and Milind and Matt. I'm sure that's a lot more we're going to discover for the rest of this year and the years to come when it comes to GenAI and AI. It's all going to be very interesting times. Now, I would like to highlight a QR code. So we want to know how we did. Maybe it's, and it'll be nice if you could just scan the QR code now and just tell us with a short feedback form. That filling it up, I heard, was only going to take you around 1 minute. So please do fill it up. And while you fill it up, please, I would like to leave you with some key takeaways. First of all, as we have heard, GenAI data tsunami is for real. So we need to be prepared for exponential data growth and complex data workflows. We also need to adapt our storage infrastructure. We need to explore scalable, high performance and secure solutions to build for AI workloads. And we can't do it all alone. So I would say we need to build industry groups or even seek expert advice. We need to leverage more on our industry insights, which are still coming. And we need to look at resources to navigate what is a very nascent GenAI data landscape. I remember the thought leadership papers that I mentioned earlier. One will talk about meeting the energy and data challenges of AI adoption. The other will use 6 use cases that show how Pure Storage is helping customers accelerate their AI ambitions. Those links are currently in your webinar chat, but don't worry, you can still access them now, or you can just wait for a follow-up email and you can access those links. Now, on behalf of our panelists, our sponsor Pure Storage, and myself at CDOTrends, thank you for joining us today. We hope this webinar provided valuable insights and actionable steps to navigate the exciting and demanding world of GenAI data storage. Stay tuned as we will continue this series in March. Till then, have a safe week.